Hi guys, it's Max here, founder of Shipfast. So in this video, I want to go over you a step-by-step guide on how you can launch your own software startup for 10 times cheaper and faster utilizing no-code tools and get your first users. And most importantly, you can do this as a total non-technical founder and without writing a single line of code by yourself, right? So I'm going to go over you the whole process from the planning to the development, design, and then to launching and get your first users. And this is based on my experience from working with founders that have raised over $1 million. So I'm just showing you the playbook on how these successful founder does it, because in our agency, we work with over 20 founders, and last year alone, they raised over $1 million. So this is their exact process, right? So let me go over to you and show you how everything works. So first of all, the first phase is planning and scoping. So most people neglect this, especially if you're a first time founder. You will think planning is not important. You would just go straight into development. That's not right. So this is a crucial step, right? So first of all, what you want to do is do user interviews. So what's the problem you're trying to solve? Who are you solving it for? So you want to find your ideal customer profile and do interviews with them. So once you do the interview, ask them questions. It can be a Google Meeting or Google Forms if they don't have time, but just ask what problem they're facing and how you can solve the problem. And then based on these interviews and also based on the information they provide, you should have a clear list of must-have features you should have in your software that can solve their problem. And based on this, when you're doing these user interviews, you can tell them you are building a software to solve their problem. So you can build a waitlist, tell them to join the waitlist for your app launch. So a real life example is like if you're building a stop smoking app, you want to target people who constantly smoke and can't quit. Ask them questions about why you can't quit, how can we help you to quit, and so you can list down the features you might need in your software that can help them to quit smoking. So this is really important. And based on the user interviews, you can start preparing a feature documentation. Feature documentation is essentially just a doc with all the features you're trying to build and you think are definitely essential in launching the first version of your software. This is important for two reasons. First of all, it can always guide you on what to build, so you never go out of scope, because a lot of founders, when they start developing, they got a bunch of ideas, a bunch of features they want to build, and they just go off track. And secondly, especially if you're choosing a no-code agency or a development agency in general you want to work with, a scope of work is really important. For the development agency to understand exactly what you want to build, a feature documentation is required. So that's why you need to prepare one. And after you've done the planning and scoping out the features, you've done your user interviews, you understand your user you're targeting. Now we'll move on to the choosing no-code tools part. When you choose no-code tools, you got to think about a few different perspectives, right? So for example, are you building a web app or a mobile app? And so basically, there are two tools that I highly recommend you should check out. One's Bubble, one's Flutterflow. So Bubble is really good for building really complex software from mobile apps to web apps, but they are primarily used for web apps, but you can definitely build mobile apps on Bubble. For example, FitSide, I built. You can wrap the app and turn it into a native mobile app. But I love Bubble is because you can scale a lot. Like we worked on an app with over 300,000 users on Bubble, and you can build really complex stuff, right, with a lot of APIs, so it doesn't have any technical barriers, so you will not face any technical challenge. For example, I can't do this feature. So that's a good thing about Bubble. Obviously, it's more advanced tool. Another platform I recommend is Flutterflow. Flutterflow is good for building mobile apps, right? So you can build it and they'll wrap the app for you, so you don't have to do any extra work, and they just help you to push on both Apple and Android store. And the good thing about Flutterflow is you can export the code, so if you care about that, choose Flutterflow and you're building a mobile app. However, Flutterflow is not good for web apps, progressive web apps. So if you're building a web app or if you want to build a tool that's really complex, so these are the tools I recommend. Other no-code tools out there just don't cut it when you have a lot of users on your platform. So these are the tools I recommend. Next is design. So before you actually go into development, you should do design, right? Like design is really important. It helps you to visualize how your app will look like. So especially if you're a non-technical founder, by designing first, you can see how your app will flow and you can do some improvement based on your design. And there are a few hacks with this. So if you're working with a good development agency like us, we have designer on our team. So we'll work closely with you and to basically design your app for you on Figma first before going to development. Or if you're building it yourself and you're designing yourself, you can go to template marketplace like UI8 and to check out the templates there. So for example, let me show you. So you can go to UI8 and find templates based on what app you're trying to build and just copy the templates and then modify on top of the template, which is way better than you just going design from scratch. So that's design, really important. especially if you hand it off to a developer, like a freelance developer, if you have design, they will know exactly what to build, right? So quite important design phase. After you have design ready, then we go to the development. So there are two routes here. So development, obviously we're talking about no-code development. So if you want to build it yourself on Bubble or Flutterflow, the framework is before you actually build your own app, your own software, you should watch tutorials, those build along tutorials, and build an app first. Like build a few practice apps, understand how the platform works, and then start building your app. Because I had the experience where I just jump in and start building my first startup, which is completely a flop because the app was barely functional. There's a whole lot of bugs. So definitely watch some tutorials, build some practice apps to get your hands dirty before actually start building your startup. And after you have got familiarized with how to build, then what you want to do is follow a step-by-step process on how to build building an app, right? So first of all, you want to build a backend first. Set up all your database, set up all your privacy rules, especially on Bubble. If you build on Bubble, set up all your privacy rules, protect the data, connect the APIs you need. For example, if you're building AI app, connect to OpenAI. So build a backend first and then start designing, right? Based on your design file of Figma, move the design file to Bubble or Flutterflow or just reference it and start designing an app interface on these no-code tools. After you have done the design, then start configuring the workflows, which is the logic behind each action, the interaction within that. After you've done the workflow, then you have to do QA testing. This is really important. This means quality assurance testing. Quality assurance testing is basically go through an app, find any bugs before launching it, find all the bugs the user might encounter by just playing around with the app and fix those, and then prepare to launch. This step, don't forget about this step. Don't neglect this step. This is really important for you to actually build an app that people actually can use, right? So this is really important. Or you can go to the alternative route, which is hire agency. So I'm going to list you some red flags rather than, just promoting our agency, right? So here are a few red flags if you're working with a no-code development agency. First, they don't prepare a feature documentation / scope of work for your project. So if you're working with a professional agency that have done this for years and had experience working with a lot of clients, they will prepare a scope of work for you, listing out all the features they're going to build for you. So this is really important. This can avoid scope creeps, or you can make sure the development agencies deliver all the features you want. So when you go and engage for an agency, ask for a feature documentation or scope of work based on the design file you will provide to them, and also your feature documentation outlining what you're trying to build. So second is no process, right? Like a good development agency should have a process. They should understand exactly how everything works. They will onboard you to a Trello board. They will make sure you have a process and project manager there to help you to guide and to give you updates. So this is really important. Make sure to ask the development agency what's your process on kickstarting the project and how would the updates and the project syncs look like. Just ask for them, ensure they have actually solid process in place so you can keep track of how the project's going and making sure you're working with a professional agency. Number 3 is no real-time communication channel. If you're working with a development agency, communication is one of the most important things, right? Like especially if they have a question about the feature, what to build here, and there's a lot of communication needed in development to make sure building a product that's 100% aligned with client expectations. So if you're working with a development agency, you guys still communicating over emails, then just forget about it because that's no real communication. And ideally, you should be put into like a group chat or Slack channel with all the developer, designer, project manager on the project which you're working with. So ideally, the process should be if you're working with a development agency, they should put you in a Slack channel or WhatsApp group or like any other real-time communication channel with the project manager, designer, developer to communicate during the project development process. So that's really important. Number 4, no contract. So obviously, no contract means no liability. So I had clients that come to me that said their other developer just took the money and just went away, or like they just under-delivered or didn't even deliver the product. So contracts is really important. And lastly, this one not many people talk about, but I tend to see this as a very big red flag, right? Like for example, there are development agencies that are just starting out that just be like, yes man, like you propose all these impossible features you think it's hard to do, and they just be like, yes, possible, we can definitely do this during this time frame under this budget. So that's not a good sign, right? That just shows you they just want to close your contract, they just want to close you as a client. And make sure you go with a development agency that can actually provide you with suggestions and tell you what's in the scope, and make sure they have like a really clear boundary on what they're going to build for you, and they will also explain you the reason why we can't have this in the scope under your budget. So that's really important. And obviously this also depends on what budget you have. Obviously if you want to work with a professional agency, they're obviously going to cost you more because they have like a whole team, the process. But if you're working with a freelancer, this will just act as a guide as well, like for example real-time communication. So these are a few red flags I think really important when you're selecting an agency. And after that, after development is publishing. So, and after development is a publishing phase. Publishing phase, two types of publishing and launching, right? So first of all is soft launch. What does soft launch mean is basically you launching with friends and family and also the early beta users, which is like you gathered from the initial user research, the waitlist users. So basically this is a soft launch, you get all their feedbacks and fix bugs and improve the user experience of app. And after you feel like this step is done, you can do a public launch. You can start promoting with influencers, running some ads, or like do some social media posting and get a real launch going and then grow your user base, right? So I think that's why I talked about the first stage is important when you're doing user interviews, because you already have the ideal client profile ready and the waitlist users. And if you're building a product that actually solves the problem, there's a high likelihood that they will actually purchase your product, like, or pay for your product. So just to give you the initial budget for you to do real marketing and actually do a public launch. So this is important. And after you have launched, and if your app is doing really well, you have to think about scaling your system to accommodate growing number of user base, right? So there are a few ways. So first one is optimize backend. So optimize backend meaning improve your database structure. And another way is use an external backend provider on top of your Nocode app. For example, Xano, which is known for like scaling database. A lot of startups that are building on Nocode like Bubble are using Xano to help support the million of users in the database. So you can use external database to support your app. And last case is that your app has grown so big, like you have outgrown the platform, right? So if that's the case, we had faced this case before, you should move off Nocode. So by the time you probably have a lot of revenue coming in, you can definitely hire good quality traditional dev team, then move off these Nocode platforms and then start scaling from there. And you should only worry about that once you get to maybe like 1 million daily active users. Yeah, so lastly, scale. Obviously that's later down the line. Overall, that's a whole process from the scoping to the choosing the Nocode tool to the design, development, publishing, and scaling. So let me know if you guys have any questions during any of the phases. Yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. This is basically how the successful founders we worked with operates. This is their playbook on raising money, on getting a lot of revenue in the apps. And yeah, we're seeing firsthand this process works. Let me know your thoughts. Any questions, comment down below. Thanks.